Hey, this is Brianna Hozak, and I am really grateful that you're here and that you accepted my challenge. This audio is day one of a 365-day verbal journal of sorts, where I will track and capture my own journey through this challenge in whatever way that looks like that day. A daily, raw podcast. I'm leaving it raw and uncut for two reasons. One is that if I have to edit anything, I will not be consistent enough to do it. So I'm not going to set myself up for failure in that way. Two is that I know the transformative power of vulnerability, both for myself in the sharing and for the women who hear, read, or experience my story in any way. Most days I will not write notes, let alone a script, so it will really be raw and messy. So take it as it is and make of it what you will. I will try to keep episodes under 15 minutes for my benefit and yours, but I make no promises, and today's will be longer, probably for sure. So here is how it all began. Today is April 23rd, 2024. It is a Scorpio full moon, during which I am releasing any and all disbelief in myself, my ability to succeed, and my ability to create epic wealth for the next 12 months, which is also the reason why this podcast is called Suspending Disbelief. Today, for the first time in a long time, I listened to a podcast, which I had stopped doing for probably the majority of the last 2-year period, simply because my mind was on such overdrive that podcasts had become little more than noise. Today, though, I decided it was time to listen to a podcast again. The one I picked first didn't work. I had no idea why, it just wouldn't play. My next choice was the Manifestation Babe podcast with Catherine Zenkina. I started on a random episode, which I had saved at some point. I'm not sure if I had listened to it before or not, but it was there, and I chose it simply following my intuition. The first episode I listened to was wonderful. I really enjoyed it, and it included a synchronicity that blew my mind. The night before, I had heard about a book, Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, and suddenly, in this episode, she mentioned the book again. Too much experience with synchronicity means I know better than to dismiss it or believe it's a coincidence. I'm supposed to read that book. So I will, although I don't have it yet. So I let it autoplay into the next episode, which was titled The Experiment That Blew Up My Business, Bank Account, and Life in a Single Year. And as I listened, all of my previous beliefs came boiling back to the surface. I suddenly found myself in the same energetic space of belief, certainty, and trust that I was in almost 2 years ago in regards to finances and my ability to have a successful business. And right near the end, I received a direct download to challenge 3 specific ladies I knew to do this with me, to follow Catherine's method and suspend disbelief for a year and live in the assumption that my success is inevitable, and so on. My last 2 years have not at all diminished my belief in this. And what I discovered in listening to this episode was that my energetics in every other area of my life were simply catching up to my energetic financial beliefs during this time. Anyway, I contacted these ladies and decided to do this raw journal, and then continued to the end of the episode where she also challenged the listeners to do this. So, let me share a little of my story for ultimate clarity here. In June of 2022, I was making approximately 8K months, and my marriage also fell apart. I left my husband, I moved out on June 30th, and within a month and a half, I had lost every form of income, from government child benefits to day home clients to coaching contracts wrapping up and more. I honestly felt like the universe was punishing me for something. Over the last 2 years, I underwent a spiritual awakening. In full, crammed into a very short period of time, relative to most people, I had this full-on spiritual awakening. I had many occasions where I couldn't feed myself if I fed my kids, so I went hungry. I rarely paid any bills until I had wound up in collections with multiple companies for the same types of utilities and accrued so much in late fees with rent that I didn't think I could ever get out of the hole I was in. Credit maxed and very quickly plummeting, my credit score plummeting. No one willing to lend me anything except my mom, who I was very hesitant to ask. We had no internet more times than I can remember, and I was supposed to be running an online business. We lost TV, then internet, then power. I was so embarrassed. There were small miracles that kept my head above water during that first year, and I will forever be grateful for those. But mostly, it was hard as fuck. The second year has so far looked like moving into a friend's home while they were staying elsewhere, yes, with their permission, for a few months and living blessed rent-free. Then finally finding the only home available in the location I sort of wanted, and really struggling each month since to make ends meet. Thankfully, in this place, I have a preset agreement with my mom to help me out if I'm behind for rent so that I don't incur late fees and I just pay her back, then borrow again if needed. This is helping me to catch up on all of those backwards late fees. However, that still doesn't feel great and I don't love borrowing, but I am so grateful. Back to today, I received the confirmation in this episode that I listened to that you can always get back to where you were. The worst that can happen is you get back to where you are, even if you go lower than that for a little while, which I clearly have in the last almost 2 years. You can also get right back to where you were, because on a soul level, you have energetically aligned with that. My belief is that energetic alignment applies across the board. So whether your top earning energetics were set in a corporate position or by working 5 jobs or through one passionate business, you have been there so you can be there again. So when I took the risk I did in leaving my husband, I could have looked at it as though I've lost it all since then and only managed to climb back up to a few $100s in recurring revenue monthly. And as she mentions in the podcast episode, I could have decided that that was my rock bottom, that things really could get that bad, that I could lose everything. But I've never felt that, even when I did lose everything. I mean, I literally was not allowed to renew my lease on my rental because I had screwed up on rent too many times. And when I moved out, I had every one of my utilities almost in collections and no proof that a year, 12 whole months after leaving him, anything was ever going to improve again. I have had the thoughts come into my mind many times that what if it was only working while I had the little bit of help with the kids that my husband brought to the table? Or, well, that was when I was running a day home 50 hours a week and my online business. But deep down, I didn't believe that. What I do believe and haven't stopped believing is that I am here to change the world. And I believe so much in the law of attraction and dark nights of the soul and energetic alignment that it held me up through nearly 2 years now of almost zero proof. I'm going to be ultra transparent here. And also, I want to point out that I am so incredibly grateful for the little trickles of income that meant that people hadn't given up on me either. Yes, they helped me financially, even just a little bit. But the biggest thing those sales meant for me was that I was not alone in my belief in myself. The highest income month through my business that I have had in the last nearly 2 years was just over $1,000 in Black Friday sales, all very low ticket, and again, only a few hundred in recurring revenue that came out of that. And a few hundred a month just doesn't cut it in this day and age, even when supplemented by child support and government child benefits and such. However, I did trust that this almost 2-year-long dark night of the soul was needed, which is a literal thing, by the way. Dark nights of the soul, shamanically, where the universe is basically trashing your life because it's not in alignment with what you're manifesting. So you need to release all the things that are falling apart in order to get into energetic alignment with what you're calling in. The less you resist, the faster it goes. I tend to resist. I'm learning not to finally, but I have resisted a lot for 2 years, trying to force things that weren't ready to be yet. And let me be so clear that 1, you do not know what it takes to get into energetic alignment. Only the universe, source, God, goddess, whatever you want to call it, does. And 2, if you decide to do this challenge as I am, yes, you can probably expect some fallout, as am I. But as she said in the podcast episode, if you knew that you could have everything you were dreaming of for just a year or even 2 of suspending disbelief, and I'm adding and trusting that the hard things that are coming up are necessary to elevate you energetically, would you do it? And if you would, then I believe that you believe hard enough to start. If you aren't willing to sacrifice and maybe even suffer, you might not be ready. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I won't promise that if you commit to this challenge, you will manifest the giant dollar amounts that she did, or even the 8K months that I was at previously. But I can guarantee that your life will look entirely different and your business will flourish if you decide and suspend disbelief as she directs. I've done it before and I'll be doing it again. I will link the episode that reset my beliefs for me today in the show notes. I also won't promise that you will see progress as quickly as I do or as quickly as she did, because the journey is different for everyone. And I'm clarifying here and now that I have a small but mighty and loyal AF audience of aligned women already. So I am not starting at square one energetically. And I count the last 2 years of healing and inner work as part of the amount of time it took me to get to where I'm going. I am already on the verge, nearing the tipping point that she mentions, to achieving the snowball effect of growth and momentum. So while I hope that this year of verbal, raw journal entries will inspire you and help you not to feel alone in the challenge that I set to you, I also want to make sure that you don't compare results or measure against anyone else's standard of success. In fact, what I feel is successful may be less than what you believe it to be. So you do you. And if you want to hear how I'm doing me, tune into the podcast every day. I'm going to aim for mornings and reflect on the last 24 hours each time. However, no promises. It's raw and I'm human. Take the time once you've listened to this to script your life, as she mentioned, 1 year from today. Write it in the present tense and be detailed. Decide that your success is inevitable. I believe that everything else in your life will hold long enough for you to meditate, take deep breaths, journal it out, listen to this, listen to that episode by Catherine Zed, and sit in your energy until you really believe it. Anything that is put off will be done in better energy later. And I'll read you my script tomorrow, even though it's already done in my head and I'm back in belief. Thank you again for being here, for accepting my challenge, and I want you to know that you are not alone on this journey, and I love you. Talk to you tomorrow.